There is a financial system operating right now, today, that controls nearly $6 trillion in global assets. It governs how hundreds of millions of people save, borrow, invest, and build wealth. It operates across more than 80 countries. It is growing faster than almost any other financial sector on Earth. Many of its foundational principles were articulated with unusual clarity by a single man, nearly 1,000 years ago, in medieval Persia. His name was Abu Hamid Al-Ghazali. And he didn't set out to design a financial system. He set out to explain how money actually works, what it is for, what it is not for, and what happens to a society when those lines get crossed. The system he described became the architecture of Islamic finance. The principles he laid down still govern trillions of dollars in transactions every single year. The history of money has many celebrated names. Al-Ghazali is not among them. The reason it matters is still unfolding today. This is forgotten economy, where debt, empires, and hidden financial systems intersect. To understand what Al-Ghazali built, you need to understand the world he was trying to make sense of. He was born around 1058 in Tus, a city in northeastern Persia, in a region now part of modern Iran. The Islamic world at that moment was at the height of its intellectual power. Astronomy, mathematics, philosophy, medicine, scholars in Baghdad and Nishapur were advancing all of it simultaneously, in a civilization at the forefront of global scholarship. But beneath that brilliance, the political structure was fracturing. The Seljuk Empire, which nominally controlled much of the Muslim world, was fighting internal power struggles. Local dynasties competed for legitimacy. Governors squeezed their populations for revenue. And when rulers felt their control slipping, the economy was usually the first place they intervened, raising taxes without warning, seizing private assets, or quietly shaving the gold content of coins to stretch their treasuries further. Al-Ghazali watched all of this. He rose quickly through the academic world, eventually appointed to the most prestigious professorial chair in the Muslim world, the Nizamiya Madrasa in Baghdad in 1091. He was 33 years old. He was brilliant, celebrated, and deeply troubled by what he saw around him. In 1095, at the height of his influence, he walked away from it all. He entered a decade of wandering: Damascus, Jerusalem, Mecca. He spent time in Sufi communities. He questioned everything he thought he knew. And when he returned, he began writing what would become one of the most consequential works in Islamic intellectual history, Ihya Ulum al-Din, the revival of the religious sciences. Most people know this book for its theology. Fewer people know that buried inside it is one of the most sophisticated analyses of economic systems produced anywhere in the medieval world. Al-Ghazali did not approach economics as a subject in its own right. That framing didn't exist yet. What he was doing was something more fundamental. He was trying to understand how human societies hold together and what causes them to break apart. His starting point was what he called maslaha, a concept roughly translated as social welfare or public good. He argued that any functioning society required 5 things to be protected: religion, life, family, property, and intellect. Remove any one of them, and the structure collapses. Property, the ability to own things, exchange them, build with them, was therefore not just an economic category. It was a social foundation, which meant that anything threatening the integrity of property threatened the whole structure above it. From that starting point, he turned his attention to money. Here is where he said something that was, for the 11th century, genuinely remarkable. He argued that money has no intrinsic value, none. Gold and silver are not valuable in themselves. They are valuable because of what they make possible. He wrote that dinars and dirhams are like stones. They serve no direct human need. Their entire worth comes from the functions they perform: measuring value, enabling exchange, allowing cooperation across time and distance. This might sound obvious today. It isn't. In the 11th century, most people, including most scholars, thought gold was valuable because it was gold. Al-Ghazali understood that money is a social technology. It is a shared agreement. And that meant it could be designed well or designed badly, used responsibly or corrupted. He mapped out exactly what money was supposed to do. It should function as a medium of exchange, the mechanism that allows a farmer and a merchant and a craftsman to trade without the impossible mathematics of barter. It should function as a unit of account, a common measure that lets people compare the value of completely different things. And it should, in a limited sense, store value, allowing people to save today and spend tomorrow. But then he drew a line. Money should not become a commodity in itself. The moment money starts being traded for money, the moment wealth generates wealth through pure interest, without any corresponding exchange of real goods or real labor, something fundamental breaks. This was not just a moral observation. He explained the mechanism. When money can earn guaranteed returns without participating in real economic risk, the incentive shifts. Instead of capital flowing toward productive activity, building things, growing things, trading things, it begins flowing toward pure financial accumulation. The real economy starves. The people who work with their hands and their time become structurally disadvantaged compared to those who hold financial assets. The gap between them widens. Trust erodes. The system destabilizes. The prohibition of riba, interest, that sits at the heart of Islamic finance today is not simply a religious rule. It is Al-Ghazali's diagnosis of what happens when money loses its purpose. What makes Al-Ghazali's contribution remarkable is not just that he described a problem. It's that he designed a system. He thought carefully about markets, how they form, how they function, what conditions make them fair or unfair. He argued that voluntary exchange between informed parties is the foundation of legitimate commerce. Deception, misrepresenting goods, adulterating products, creating artificial scarcity, was not just dishonest, it was corrosive. It degraded the information that markets need to function. He thought about production. He described a hierarchy of economic activity, with basic industries, food, clothing, shelter, as obligations of any functioning society. He understood that complex production requires division of labor and coordination, and that cooperation itself has economic value. He thought about distribution. Hoarding, he argued, was destructive, not just morally, but mechanically. Money locked away in chests does not pay workers, does not fund trades, does not circulate through the communities that need it. He described it as blocking the flow that keeps a society alive. And he thought about the state. He outlined clear responsibilities for rulers, maintaining justice in markets, ensuring that necessities remained accessible, preventing the kind of monopolistic price manipulation that exploited crises. He was direct about currency debasement, calling it theft. Not metaphorical theft, actual theft, because debasing coins transferred hidden value from every holder of currency to whoever controlled the mint. He predicted, with some precision, what would happen if a state manipulated its currency repeatedly. People would stop trusting it and shift to foreign money instead. The history of monetary collapses, from ancient Rome to modern Venezuela, tends to confirm that prediction. Taken together, these ideas form something coherent, a framework. Here is something that rarely gets discussed. Al-Ghazali's work did not stay inside the Islamic world. His major writings were translated into Latin and circulated through medieval European universities. Scholars working in Sicily, a crossroads of Arab and Christian civilization, transmitted his ideas into the scholastic tradition. Historians who have studied the intellectual lineage of medieval European economic thought have documented parallels between Al-Ghazali's Ihya and the Summa Theologica of Thomas Aquinas, written nearly 2 centuries later. Parallels that many historians argue are unlikely to be coincidental. Both thinkers argued that money has no intrinsic value. Both condemned usury as a distortion of money's legitimate function. Both described the ethics of fair exchange. Both insisted that economic activity must ultimately serve human welfare, not become an end in itself. Aquinas is remembered as the founding figure of Western scholastic economics. Al-Ghazali, who laid out these same arguments 150 years earlier, is largely absent from mainstream Western economic history. Joseph Schumpeter, one of the most influential historians of economic thought, famously described the centuries between ancient Greece and medieval Europe as a great gap in economic thinking. What he overlooked was that those centuries coincided almost exactly with the Islamic Golden Age. The gap was not empty. It was simply located somewhere Western scholarship wasn't looking. Al-Ghazali died in 1111. He was approximately 53 years old. The principles he articulated, prohibiting interest, requiring asset-backed transactions, emphasizing risk-sharing over debt extraction, protecting the productive economy from pure financial speculation, did not remain historical artifacts. They became the operating logic of Islamic finance. Today, that system manages close to $6 trillion in assets globally. It is present in more than 80 countries. Islamic banking grew by more than 17% in 2024 alone, faster than most conventional banking sectors. Projections suggest the total could reach nearly $10 trillion by the end of this decade. The specific instruments are modern. Sukuk, often described as Islamic bonds, are sophisticated financial products used to fund infrastructure projects from Saudi Arabia to Malaysia to the United Kingdom. Murabaha contracts structure trade finance across global supply chains. Musharaka arrangements fund business ventures on the basis of shared profit and shared risk rather than borrowed money at fixed interest. But the underlying logic of all of these instruments, the reason they are structured the way they are, traces directly back to the principles Al-Ghazali articulated in 11th century Persia. No interest, no pure financial speculation detached from real assets, no hoarding, no debasement, no deception. Money as a tool for exchange, not an end in itself. There is something worth sitting with here. Al-Ghazali wrote in a world where empires were fragmenting, currencies were being debased by desperate rulers, and the gap between those who extracted wealth and those who produced it was widening visibly. He looked at that environment and tried to understand the mechanism, why it was happening, what structural features made it inevitable, and whether a different design was possible. His answer was not utopian. He understood that markets were necessary, that profit was legitimate, that commerce required incentives. What he argued was that the design of the financial system, its rules, its prohibitions, its underlying logic, shapes who benefits and who doesn't. A system built to serve exchange produces different outcomes than a system built to serve accumulation. Whether Islamic finance as it operates today fully realizes those principles is a separate question, and a contested one. Financial systems, like all human institutions, drift from their foundational logic. But the principles themselves remain embedded in the architecture. Nearly $1 trillion in sukuk are currently outstanding globally. Hundreds of millions of people structure their financial lives around the framework Al-Ghazali helped define. The ideas of a Persian scholar from the 11th century, someone most people in the West have never heard of, are governing a meaningful portion of the world's financial activity right now. The forgotten economists are rarely the ones who failed to figure things out. They are usually the ones whose contributions traveled across civilizations without getting their names attached. Al-Ghazali understood something about money that is still worth understanding. It is not a natural force. It is a design. And the rules built into that design determine, quietly and over long periods of time, whose interests it serves. That design question was never settled. It is still open. And the answers Al-Ghazali proposed nearly 1,000 years ago are still in a $6 trillion corner of the global financial system being tested.